The cards slid across the green felt table, each one whispering possibility. Jack McCall watched the dealer's weathered hands move with practiced precision, the lamplight catching on his gold tooth when he smiled. For men hunched around the table, their faces maps of hard living and harder choices. The air hung thick with cigar smoke and desperation. "I'm out," said the man to Jack's left, tossing his cards face down. "Too rich for my blood," said another, pushing back from the table. Only Jack and the old-timer remained. The old man's hands trembled slightly as he pushed forward a folded piece of paper. "All I got left is this," he said, his voice like boots on gravel. "Deed to the last call. Saloon out in Bitter Creek. Ain't much, but it's standing." The other players chuckled. Jack studied the man's face, noting the sunken cheeks and yellowed eyes. This wasn't a bluff. This was a man with nothing left to lose. "I'll see that," Jack said, pushing his remaining chips forward. "Let's see what you got." The old man laid down his cards. 2 pair, queens and tens. Jack turned over his hand. 3 nines. The old man's shoulders slumped. He slid the deed across the table without a word, then stood and walked away, disappearing into the night like a ghost. Jack stared at the yellowed paper, wondering what a man like him would do with a broken-down saloon in a ghost town. The road to Bitter Creek stretched before Jack like a promise, winding through scrubland and rocky hills. His horse's hooves kicked up dust that hung in the air behind them. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the world into shades of brown and gold. Jack pulled his hat lower, shielding his eyes from the glare. Bitter Creek appeared on the horizon like a mirage, a cluster of weathered buildings clinging to existence. As Jack rode in, he felt eyes on him from behind curtained windows. A dog barked somewhere, the sound echoing through empty streets. The town wasn't dead, but it was dying. The last call stood at the far end of the main street, its faded sign hanging crooked above double doors. Jack dismounted, tying his horse to the hitching post. Up close, the saloon looked even worse than he'd imagined. The paint peeled like dead skin. One window was boarded up, another cracked in a spiderweb pattern. The porch sagged in the middle as if weary from years of footsteps. Jack pushed open the doors. They creaked in protest, revealing a dim interior thick with dust. Sunlight filtered through dirty windows, illuminating dancing particles in the air. The bar stretched along one wall, its surface dulled by time. Tables sat empty, chairs overturned. A piano stood in one corner, silent and forgotten. This was what he'd won. This hollow shell of a place where people once laughed and drank and fought. Jack walked to the bar, running his hand along the wood. His fingers left trails in the dust. "Wouldn't do that if I were you." Jack turned. A woman stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by sunlight. As she stepped inside, he saw she was older, maybe 50, with silver streaking her dark hair. Her face was lined but handsome, her eyes sharp. "Place is filthy," she said, moving closer. "I'm Martha Gaines. Run the general store down the street." Jack McCall. He offered his hand. She looked at it, then shook it firmly. "You the new owner?" she asked. "Seems that way." Martha's eyes scanned the room. "Old Emmett finally lost it in a game, huh? Can't say I'm surprised. You knew him." Everyone knew Emmett. He built this place back when Bitter Creek was more than just a spot on the map. She paused. "What are you planning to do with it?" Jack looked around at the saloon, his saloon. "Haven't decided yet." Martha nodded, as if his answer confirmed something. "Well, Mr. McCall, welcome to Bitter Creek. Don't expect much." She turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. If I were you, I'd leave the cellar alone." Before Jack could ask what she meant, she was gone, leaving him alone with the dust and silence. That night, Jack slept on a cot in what must have been Emmett's old room behind the bar. The ceiling creaked above him, and somewhere in the walls, something scurried. Sleep came in fits and starts, his dreams filled with shuffling cards and faceless men. Morning brought clarity and purpose. Jack spent the day cleaning, sweeping years of dust from the floors, wiping down the bar until the wood gleamed in the sunlight. He righted chairs and tables, replaced the broken window with a piece of canvas until he could get glass. By evening, the place looked almost respectable. Jack stood behind the bar, surveying his work. The saloon still felt empty, but it was clean empty now, ready for new beginnings. He poured himself a drink from a bottle he'd found that wasn't completely turned to vinegar. The doors swung open. A man stepped inside, tall and broad-shouldered, with a silver star pinned to his vest. "Sheriff," Jack said, nodding. "You'd be McCall." The sheriff's voice was flat. "Heard you won this place off Emmett." "That's right." The sheriff looked around, taking in the changes. "Planning to reopen?" "Thinking about it. Town's not what it used to be. Most folks just passing through now." "I noticed." The sheriff fixed Jack with a hard stare. You passing through too? Jack considered the question. He'd been passing through places his whole life, never staying long enough to put down roots, never finding a reason to. We'll see, he said finally. The sheriff nodded slowly. Well, you need anything. Office is down the street. He turned to leave, then paused. One piece of advice. Don't go digging around where you shouldn't. It was the second warning in as many days. Jack's curiosity prickled. What's that supposed to mean? Just what I said. The sheriff tipped his hat and left. Jack finished his drink, then poured another. The saloon was quiet, but not silent. It creaked and settled, as if adjusting to his presence. As the light faded outside, shadows deepened in the corners of the room. Jack lit a lamp, watching the golden light push back the darkness. His eyes drifted to a door behind the bar. The cellar, he guessed. Leave it alone, they'd said. Both of them, which only made him want to open it more. Jack took the lamp and moved toward the door. It was locked, but the key hung on a nail nearby. The lock turned with a reluctant click. The door swung open, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. The lamplight couldn't penetrate far enough to see the bottom. Jack hesitated, then started down. The air grew cooler with each step, carrying a musty smell of earth and age. The stairs ended in a dirt floor. Jack held the lamp higher, illuminating rows of shelves stocked with bottles and casks. A wine cellar. Nothing more. He moved deeper into the space, his footsteps muffled by the dirt. The cellar was larger than he'd expected, extending beyond the lamplight's reach. As he walked, something caught his eye, a discoloration in the far wall. Jack moved closer. It wasn't a wall at all, but a heavy curtain, thick with dust. Jack pulled it aside, revealing another room beyond. He stepped through, raising the lamp. The light fell on a face. Jack stumbled back, nearly dropping the lamp. His heart hammered in his chest. But the face didn't move. It was a photograph, framed and hanging on the wall. A young woman with serious eyes and a slight smile. Next to it hung another photograph, and another. Dozens of them covered the walls, faces staring out from the past. Below the photographs, shelves lined the walls. They held objects, a child's doll, a pocket watch, a pair of spectacles, a wedding ring. Each item was arranged carefully, respectfully, like offerings or memorials. In the center of the room stood a stone slab, raised about waist high. On it lay more objects, dried flowers, letters tied with ribbon, a small Bible. Jack moved closer, holding the lamp above the slab. Something was carved into the stone. Names. Dates. The slab was a tombstone. Jack's breath caught. This wasn't a cellar. It was a tomb. He backed away, his mind racing. Who were these people? Why were they memorialized here, beneath a saloon? Jack's eyes darted around the room, taking in more details. There were dozens of items, each seemingly placed with care, each representing someone gone. The lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows on the faces in the photographs. Jack felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cellar's temperature. He needed air. He turned and hurried back through the curtain, up the stairs, not stopping until he reached the bar. He slammed the cellar door shut, turning the key in the lock. Jack poured himself another drink with shaking hands. He'd seen death before, had caused it more than once. But this quiet monument to the dead, unsettled him in a way he couldn't name. Sleep eluded him that night. Jack lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling, his mind filled with the faces from the photographs. When dawn finally broke, he was already up, making coffee on the small stove in the back room. The doors opened earlier than he expected. Martha Gaines stepped inside, her expression grim. "You went down there," she said. It wasn't a question. Jack nodded, pouring a second cup of coffee. He handed it to her without asking if she wanted it. Martha took the cup, warming her hands around it. "I told you not to." "You did." "Didn't say why." She sighed, sitting at one of the tables. "Sit down, Mr. McCall. There's something you should know about the last call." Jack sat across from her, waiting. "Bitter Creek wasn't always like this," Martha began. "Used to be a mining town. Good silver in these hills. People came from all over, looking for their fortune. This saloon was the heart of the town back then." She took a sip of coffee. "Emmett built it after he struck silver. Made more money from whiskey than he ever did from mining. Everyone came to the last call, miners, merchants, ladies of the evening. Even the preacher, though he'd never admit it." Martha's eyes grew distant. "Then the fever came. Summer of '78. Started with the children. Spread fast. Doctor couldn't do anything. People died by the dozens." "The people in the photographs," Jack said quietly. Martha nodded. "Emmett lost his wife and daughter. Most of us lost someone. The graveyard filled up quick. But Emmett, he couldn't bear to put his family in the ground. So he built that room in the cellar, laid them to rest there. There are dozens of items down there, Jack said. Not just two. After a while, others asked if they could leave mementos of their loved ones. A place to remember them. Emmett never could say no. Martha's voice softened. It became a kind of shrine. People would go down there to talk to those they'd lost. To leave things. To remember. Jack thought about the carefully arranged items, the photographs, the names carved in stone. Why keep it secret? Martha's eyes met his. It's not a secret, Mr. McCall. It's private. Sacred, even. Those memories belong to the people of this town. And now the saloon belongs to me, Jack said. Yes, Martha agreed. It does. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Jack had no answer. Martha finished her coffee and stood to leave. Town's having a social at the church tomorrow evening, she said. Might be a good chance for you to meet some folks. She paused at the door. They'll want to know your intentions. After she left, Jack sat alone in the empty saloon. The morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. His eyes drifted to the cellar door. What were his intentions? He'd never owned anything worth keeping before. Never stayed in one place long enough to care. Jack spent the day working on the saloon, fixing what could be fixed, making lists of what needed replacing. The physical labor helped quiet his mind. By evening, his muscles ached pleasantly, and the main room looked almost inviting. He was washing up when the doors opened again. The sheriff stood there, hat in hand. Heard you went down to the cellar, he said without preamble. Jack dried his hands on a rag. News travels fast. Small town. The sheriff stepped inside, looking around. Place is looking better. Thanks. Martha tell you about the social tomorrow? Jack nodded. Good. The sheriff put his hat back on. Folks will want to meet the man who owns the last call now. And the tomb beneath it, Jack added. The sheriff's expression hardened. That's hallowed ground, McCall. Those are our people down there. I understand that. Do you? The sheriff stepped closer. Because I'm not sure you do. This town's been through a lot. Lost a lot. That cellar, it's all some folks have left. Jack met the sheriff's gaze. I'm not planning to disturb it. See that you don't. The sheriff turned to leave, then stopped. You know, Emmett tried to sell this place for years. No takers. Then he loses it in a card game to a stranger passing through. He looked back at Jack. Makes a man wonder. After the sheriff left, Jack poured himself a drink and sat at one of the tables. The saloon was quiet, but not empty. He could feel the weight of its history pressing down on him. The lives that had passed through these doors. The memories held within these walls. And below, in the darkness, the tomb with its photographs and mementos. The physical remains of grief and remembrance. Jack had never been one for putting down roots. His life had been a series of temporary stops, moving on whenever the past threatened to catch up or the present became too complicated. He'd left behind plenty, jobs, women, opportunities. But he'd never left behind a grave. His mind drifted to another town, another time. A small wooden cross on a hillside overlooking a river. A promise made and broken. A debt unpaid. Jack finished his drink and stood. He lit a lamp and unlocked the cellar door. The stairs creaked under his weight as he descended into the cool darkness. This time, he moved with purpose, going directly to the curtain and pushing it aside. The faces in the photographs watched him enter. Jack set the lamp on the stone slab, illuminating the names carved there. He read them silently, committing them to memory. Then he looked at the objects, the treasured possessions of the dead, preserved by the living. Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a carved wooden horse, no bigger than his thumb. He carried it for years, a talisman of sorts. A reminder. He placed it carefully among the other items on the slab. Hello, Sarah, he said softly. The church was a simple white building with a small steeple. Lanterns hung from the porch, casting a warm glow as the sun set. Jack could hear music and voices as he approached. He hesitated at the steps, straightening his collar. It had been a long time since he had attended any kind of social gathering. Inside, the church had been transformed. Benches pushed to the walls, tables laden with food, a small band playing in one corner. People stood in groups, talking and laughing. They fell silent as Jack entered, all eyes turning to him. The sheriff stepped forward. Folks, this is Jack McCall, new owner of the last call. He emphasized the word owner slightly, a reminder to everyone, including Jack, of what that meant. There was a moment of awkward silence. Then Martha appeared at Jack's side, taking his arm. Come on, Mr. McCall. Let me introduce you to some people. She led him through the crowd, making introductions. Jack shook hands, nodded at appropriate moments, tried to remember names. Everyone was polite, but reserved. They studied him with careful eyes, measuring him against some standard he couldn't see. "That's Eleanor Whitman," Martha said, nodding toward an elderly woman sitting alone near the band. Her husband was the town doctor. Worked himself to death during the fever. There's something of his down in that cellar. Jack looked at the woman, noting the dignity in her posture, the sorrow in her eyes. "And that's Thomas Reed," Martha continued, indicating a middle-aged man with a beard. "Lost his entire family, wife and 3 children. He visits the cellar every Sunday after church." As Martha guided him through the room, she told him more stories. The blacksmith who lost his apprentice. The schoolteacher who buried 6 of her students in 1 week. The banker whose wife died in childbirth, the baby following a day later. Each person connected to that room beneath the saloon. Each one carrying grief like a familiar weight. The band struck up a livelier tune. Some people began to dance. Jack found himself standing near the food table, watching. Martha had been called away, leaving him alone with his thoughts. "Mr. McCall." Jack turned. Eleanor Whitman stood beside him, leaning on a cane. "Mrs. Whitman," he said, nodding respectfully. "I understand you've seen our memorial," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Yes, ma'am. My Robert's stethoscope is there. He used it to listen to so many hearts. To tell people whether their loved ones would live or die." Her eyes met Jack's. "What did you think when you saw it?" Jack considered his answer carefully. "I thought it was a sacred place." Eleanor studied him for a long moment. "Martha says you're fixing up the saloon." "Trying to. Are you planning to stay in Bitter Creek, Mr. McCall?" The question caught him off guard. It was the same one the sheriff had asked, but coming from this woman, it carried different weight. "I don't know," he answered honestly. Eleanor nodded, as if his answer confirmed something. "None of us planned to stay, you know. We were all just passing through, looking for something better. Then life happened. Death happened." She smiled sadly. "Now we're here. And so are they, in that cellar." She patted his arm gently. "Think about that, Mr. McCall." Eleanor moved away, leaving Jack with her words echoing in his mind. He looked around the room at these people, survivors of tragedy, keepers of memory. They had built something here, in this dying town. Something that mattered. The social continued around him, but Jack felt separate from it, observing from a distance. These people were connected by shared history, shared loss. He was an outsider, a stranger who had won their sacred place in a card game. Yet they had invited him here. They were watching him, yes, but also waiting to see what kind of man now owned the last call and the tomb beneath it. Jack slipped out before the social ended, walking back to the saloon through the quiet streets. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like spilled silver. The last call loomed ahead, a darker shadow against the night. Inside, Jack lit a lamp and sat at the bar. The bottle of whiskey stood nearby, tempting. Instead, he pulled out a piece of paper and a pencil. He began to write, listing repairs needed, supplies to order, plans for the future. His future. Here. The thought should have frightened him. Instead, it felt like setting down a heavy load he'd carried too long. The next morning, Jack rose early. He swept the porch, washed the windows until they gleamed, polished the bar. Then he unlocked the front doors and left them open, letting in the fresh air and sunlight. It didn't take long for the first visitor to arrive. Thomas Reed, the man who had lost his family, stood hesitantly at the entrance. "Morning," Jack said. "Morning." Reed looked around, taking in the changes. "Place looks better. Still work to do." Reed nodded. His eyes drifted to the cellar door. "I usually visit on Sundays, but—" "Go ahead," Jack said, moving to unlock the door. Reed descended the stairs, disappearing into the darkness. Jack returned to his work, giving the man privacy. About 20 minutes later, Reed emerged, his eyes red but his expression peaceful. "Thank you," he said simply. "You're welcome here any time," Jack replied. Throughout the day, others came. Some alone, some in pairs. Each came to visit the cellar, to spend time with their memories. Jack welcomed them all, then left them to their grief and remembrance. By evening, word had spread. The last call was open again. Not as a saloon, not yet, but as what it had become, a place of memory, a keeper of stories. Martha arrived as the sun was setting, carrying a basket covered with a cloth. "Thought you might be hungry," she said, setting it on the bar. Jack lifted the cloth, revealing fresh bread, cheese, and apples. "Thank you." Martha looked around. "Heard you had visitors today." "A few." "And—" Jack met her gaze. "And they're welcome here. This is their place too." Martha smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. You might do all right here, Mr. McCall. After she left, Jack took a lamp and went down to the cellar. He pushed aside the curtain and entered the tomb. The faces in the photographs watched him, familiar now. The objects on the shelves and stone slab told their stories in silent testimony. Jack set the lamp down and pulled up a chair he'd brought earlier. He sat facing the stone, his wooden horse still where he'd placed it. Her name was Sarah, he said to the quiet room. My daughter. She was 7 when the cough took her. The words came hard, pushed past years of silence. I wasn't there. Was off chasing fortune in the goldfields. By the time I got back, she was in the ground. Jack's voice grew rough. Her mother never forgave me. Neither did I. He fell silent, the weight of confession pressing on him. The faces in the photographs watched without judgment. The objects on the shelves kept their secrets. I've been running ever since, Jack continued finally. Never staying anywhere long. Never letting myself care about a place or people. He looked around at the mementos of lives lost. But you all stayed. You built something here. A community. A way to remember. Jack stood, touching his wooden horse gently. I think maybe it's time I stopped running. The next morning, Jack hung a new sign outside the last call. It read, Open. Below, in smaller letters. All welcome. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the street, Jack stood on the porch of his saloon. His saloon, with its bar and tables and piano. And its cellar, with its photographs and mementos and memories. Martha appeared beside him, looking at the sign. All welcome, she asked. All welcome, Jack confirmed. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching as the town began to stir. A rider passed by, tipping his hat. The blacksmith opened his shop across the street, the ring of his hammer echoing in the morning air. You know, Martha said finally, Emmett always said the last call wasn't just a name. It was a reminder. Of what? That we all get one last call. One last chance to make things right. Jack thought about Sarah, about the wooden horse that now rested among the treasured possessions of Bitter Creek's dead. About the promise he'd made at her grave and broken 100 times since. I think Emmett might have been onto something, he said. Martha smiled. I think so too. Together, they watched as Thomas Reed approached, the first visitor of the day. Jack nodded in greeting, then stepped aside to let the man enter. The last call was open again. Not just a saloon, but a sanctuary. A keeper of memories. A place for the living to honor the dead. And for one drifter, a place to finally call home.